But I'm delighted to be here, especially this event that has so much input from the community, and different sponsors have helped to make it possible. So I'm glad that it's my turn to be here. Um, I'm I'm best probably known as a politician, as a former governor, and perhaps a little bit as an ambassador, but I'm a new person today, or at least a person who's been hiding inside me for a long time as a poet. And it's a new incarnation, and it's quite different from what my career has been. As you know, in the audience or the viewers, uh, as a politician, you have to be an extrovert. Uh, you have to be jolly and positive and sort of cover up any inner complicated feelings you might have. But as a poet, you can be quiet while you're writing poetry. And so I've discovered my poetic side. And part of it is just retirement, where I have more time to think, to be alone. And part of it is aging, where you reflect more about your life. And so it's been a real pleasure to be called a poet. First, I didn't believe it when somebody called me a poet because I wasn't sure what I was actually doing with poetry. But this seems to be a good time for poetry because people want to be more reflective in because of the changing times and the pandemic. And we may want to turn off the news and think about things. So I'll stop talking and share some poems with you. The title is Red Kite, Blue Sky. And the title comes from two poems in the book, written at different times and in different places. Red Kite was written about 2 years ago when I was in Sicily with friends, and some of my friends made a kite, and we were by the seashore in Sicily, and the vision of this gorgeous red kite just stayed with me. So here goes. Red kite seeks blue sky, soaring higher and higher, flipping its tail in and out, half circles, crazy dips, a runaway kite pulled in against its will, fights back before it falls. Now, Blue Sky was written during the height of the pandemic, when I felt sort of down and wondered what would happen and worried about the virus, as many of you may have been. But then I went for a walk and made this discovery. Blue sky. I have time, a bushel full, no, a truckload, a storage unit full of time. Still, I portion time out carefully, almost like in the old days, except now I stretch my neck and raise my head and keep it there until it hurts to look at the blue sky. Long ago, before coronavirus, I looked at the sky for weather, or at night for stars. The blue sky gave me answers by the hour. I didn't even say thank you. Yesterday, I went for a walk and gazed upward, expecting little. I looked up at the blue sky. The longer I looked, I saw more layers of blue. The blue sky had depth, a clean teacup of blue without a crack. I could see through one blue to find another blue. The longer I held my head up, blue became more blue until I continued my walk and thanked the sky for being blue. I also was inspired to write about current events that were happening in our lives. And I wrote one It's called I Can't Breathe. I am falling into fear, unwinding the ties that bind. The ties that bind are splitting into shreds that float from a virus-infected sky. A black man couldn't breathe because a white man pressed down on his neck. Mama, he cried before he died, after more than 9 slow minutes. I sit in my chair here at home, where I try to move close to where they march down pulsating streets, opening their red mouths to needle-pointed smoke, choking on injustice. I guess that's pretty clear. I wanted to be marching with them, and I did in spirit. I wrote a few poems about COVID. I just wanted to express myself. Here, this is called Beautiful COVID. The photo of COVID-19 greets me on the news every night. It is brilliant. Pretty red clusters, the color of geraniums, dance in a framed circle. If the virus were a flower, I would pluck it and put it into a clear glass vase to admire on the mantelpiece. A beautiful virus, lethal to the touch. Every petal spits out venom that can scar the branches of my lungs, steal my breath, and walk away triumphant. So we were all affected by this phenomenon, and we are still experiencing some of the consequences. This is another COVID poem called The Handshake. My right arm used to jut out like a jack-in-the-box to reach for a stranger's hand when I was marching on the campaign trail in the old days before coronavirus. Pressing the flesh, it was called then, an expression I rejected. I was certain that each handshake had meaning. My hand was sending a message. This is who I am. Trust me. A stranger who was caught by my hand had to respond to be freed with a firm grip or a weak one, rough or smooth. When a gargantuan hand incised my wedding band into my finger, I cried, ouch! Was that my punishment or his mistake? I stretched my grimace into a smile and had to forgive him. Not all handshakes were firm. Some hands were suspended in the air, limp as a tiptoed ballerina wanting to be caught by her partner. Now, standing 6 feet apart, further than 2 arms can reach, we keep our hands dutifully by our sides. I'll read you one other poem from COVID called Lockdown. Lockdown is a criminal word. What is a crime? There is no concertina wire. Concertina, a musical word, to keep me within the circumference. Circumference, a many-syllabled word. Now I feel the invisible fence vibrating, the kind that shocks dogs to keep them within bounds. There were endless days before the plague when I didn't want to leap out of bounds. I didn't feel the pull of the leash. But now that the fence encircles me, I want to get pliers. There's a poem that's a little bit on the lighter side, and it's about my cat. I got this cat from the Humane Society after my second husband died, and some of the poems in this book relate to his death and his presence when it was real. And my cat turns out to be a very good cat, but you'll find out more about her in this poem. Cat. Her real name was Gina. That's what the Humane Society told me. But I call her Kitty, and she doesn't respond to either name. My cat plumps herself at the straight arm of my sofa, feet tucked neatly under her coat, purring her song. She invites me to smooth her, to feel her pillow under my hand. I'm not invited inside her thoughts. She sits mute as a Buddha carved from stone. Whoosh! She streaks into the next room as if on fire. See something I can't see. Hear something I can't hear. Composed again, even sedate, she claims proximity. Sits where I sit, walks where I walk, climbs across my lap, and seats herself regally by my side. She stares intelligent at me, as if ready for a chat. Her coin round pupils are circled in gold. She holds her gaze until I give up. A yawn unclips her red mouth, her pointy tiger teeth, a beast. Her mouth closes, her head is lowered. Ah, we are companions once again. Good kitty, I say in my baby voice, and think I'm falling in love. Until she paws herself onto the dining table as if it were her place to sit across from me. Off, I yell, nothing. Down, I shout, nothing. She is like an Egyptian statue buried with Tutankhamun. Impatient, irritated, I exercise my two-handed superiority and drag her down, pulling against her needle paws. She finds a chair that fits her form and sleeps the day away. She is a night creature, silent in her roaming until, crash, I startle. What is it? Tablecloth askew, candlesticks toppled, candles unhinged. My sweet cat, having terrified herself, has zipped into oblivion. Together again, we sit on the sofa, her flank wedded to my thigh. Her small chin lifted high rests on my arm. I feel her cool breath hover over my willing wrist. You're such a good kitty, I purr. Lying in bed at night, I wait for her usual visit. She gives no hint of her stealthy approach. A quick paw lands on my chest and then another until 4 paws have stepped over my body. She plants herself on the other side and searches until she finds a nest between my twig legs. She curls herself into a coiled rope, no beginning or end. We share our bodily warmth, hers intermingled with mine, searching for our separate sleep. I dare not move. And those of you who have cats may find something in common. This is a poem about spring, before spring. I long for a shaft of warmth from the sun to touch my back and reach down to my toes. It's been a bitter winter, everyone says, arriving early before I found my gloves and staying until I lost one, then two. Sharp winds sliced my cheeks and burned my brow with a film of ice. Yesterday, snow sealed the fields again, white to the edge of the road, where gray mounds sit crystallized with black specks, sequined together, surrounded by a fringe of water that flows downhill and freezes at the base. I caution myself, don't slip. I step high over the water, raise my feet over a slab of ice. I dread that I will crash into a jumble of elbows and knees and break my leg, injure my arm, imprison myself in a stiff cast. I long for the water to run to the sea. I long for the sky to unfasten the clouds, and I long for the clouds to wash blue. That was actually written about last winter, not this past winter, which was actually quite mild. This is a poem that again takes place on the shores of Lake Champlain. It's called Sunning Myself, where I'll let the poem speak for itself. I was sitting by the lake, pulling myself away from the world, working hard on withdrawal, gazing down at the stones below and up at the slow-moving sky, when my escape was blocked by the news of the day. 2 mass shootings, 9 dead in Dayton, 20 more in El Paso, many more wounded. Interviews with bystanders who had nothing new to say. Still, I kept the TV on, wanting more news. The camera moved to a woman who wept into a large man's shoulder, to a girl who carried a white sign with pink lettering, free hugs. She did what she could, poor thing. A reporter hungry for footage held the microphone to someone's twisted face, doing her best to be kind. To think that all this time when it happened, I had been busy sunning myself. If anybody wants to put questions in the chat room, I will be happy to answer them afterwards. This is a more, sometimes it's almost embarrassing for me to read my poetry out loud because in many ways it's very personal. But when it connects with someone, that's when I feel terrific. So some of these poems might resonate with some of you. This is called I Knew I Was Loved. When you were alive, I knew I was loved, like a child knows her mother. My words floated in the air and landed on your fingertips before you flicked them back to me. How free I felt, coupled at your side. The sinews of memory are strong, stretching me back to where we walked, when your steps paced with mine, my shoulder weighted by your hand. We saw the same sights, our thoughts were twins. Now that you are gone, I know I was loved, and that is almost enough. There's a poem that I wrote a while ago. It's called No Longer. And obviously, the things you can't do anymore as you get older, but you still want to do. I try not to be too dark about aging, because one of the gifts of aging is that it has allowed me to be a poet and to explore new ways of creativity. So it isn't all dark, it isn't all losses, but it is change. So this poem is called No Longer. No longer will we make love before breakfast. No longer will I dream of seeing New Zealand or the Cape of Good Hope or bears in the wild. No longer will I say yes more than no. No longer will danger sparkle and safety look dull. No longer will I look at my body without comparison, excuse me, between who I was and who I have become, blaming the light for the difference. No longer can I toss my hair over my face at 100 strokes. No longer can I do without night cream and day cream, slathering on ounce after ounce. No longer can I be comfortable sitting in my chair reading for hours without getting up to stretch my arms and legs. No longer can I walk without looking down at my feet to avoid mean cracks and malicious bumps. No longer can I skip downstairs like a girl flying without feeling a thing. No longer can I approach the precipice without swaying against my will. No longer do I think ahead of where I will be in 10 years or 20 or more. Now I think in ones or twos or threes, long enough to still hunger for the food of life. No longer do I wish for the next day or the next year to come quickly, like I did the year I turned 10. I want the days to saunter like a leisurely museum stroller who stops now and then to gaze and get closer to the canvas to see the brush strokes and then steps back for the long view before moving on. This is a poem I wrote fairly recently. It's a very simple poem. I liked being we. We were doubles, not one but two, walking in tandem. When I was silent, you spoke. When I spoke, you listened. I drank your words as if they belonged to me. We fed each other's outpouring before we whisked them together into we, us, and our. We is a habit you left me with, so comfortable and strong. I is skinny. I is skinny. It stands alone, brittle to the touch. It needs something at its side. I, I am, I am alive. I'm trying to figure out which poem to read next. This is a poem I wrote after my youngest son, youngest son, his son and my grandchild was born. It's called Baby Thomas, Big Sister. When Sam and Jacob were born, I prayed I would live until their bar mitzvahs. My wish was granted last Saturday in the old synagogue, where Jacob recited the portion of the Torah flawlessly. Today, baby Thomas is 7 days old. I lean into his bassinet, where Edgar and I once slept, and hover over his form, fresh from the womb, his eyes fluttering now and then, his face half hidden by his blue woolen cap to keep his body heat safely inside. I count 13 years until his bar mitzvah. I will be far away when he sings his Torah portion. But I know him now, the new little man, wrapped in the blanket I knitted for him, stitch by stitch. His 2-year-old sister, Charlotte, thrown over Daddy's shoulder like a sack of potatoes, shrieks with delicious terror, knowing Daddy is safe, Mommy is safe, and she is the big sister. I'll just read one more and then we'll have a break. This is a poem I wrote fairly late as I was thinking of my past, and then before we sign off, after the questions up, I can read a few more. This is called Voyage. Last night, I thought about my mother's voyage to America, what she faced by herself, saying goodbye to all the relatives at the Zurich train station, accepting prettily wrapped boxes of chocolate from everyone and given to me on the train to carry safely in a sack heavy for a 5-year-old. Left behind on the train. How awful. Did my brother make it up, or did this happen? That Nazi soldiers walked through the train questioning everyone. The conductor vouched for my mother, having met her regularly on the commuter train in Zurich. I remember how scratchy the blanket was in the sleeping car. That's all. Waiting in Genoa for our boat to arrive. Our names on the manifest with an H for Hebrew, I found out later. I looked out the window from the top floor of the hotel and saw, we thought, Japanese soldiers lined up in formation 10 days before Italy entered the war. My mother did not unclothe her fear to us. We found our cabin already occupied by 2 women and a baby. We settled in somehow, lugging the big blue trunk, which stood upright and opened sideways. Safely inside our cabin on the SS Manhattan, I was delighted by the new taste of apple pie a la mode and playing shuffleboard on the tilting ship. We lined up alphabetically at the pier under the letter M for May with a couple named Miller who became our friends and gave each of us a beautiful book every Christmas. Finally, cousins Fred and Irene Kahn found us. She, already American, wearing a red hat, red shoes, red pocketbook, opened our eyes wide. Madeleine, you have to have coils. All the Goyles in America have coils. We repeated her words for years, silly with laughter. So that's a good memory. And as a child, I was not afraid of anything because I didn't know what the real circumstances were. I'd be happy to answer some questions if you want to forward me some.
First of all, I'll take a little sniff before I unmuted myself. They were so moving, and I just so appreciate you sharing your memories and your thoughts with us, Governor Kunin. And that's something that's been echoed in the chat. So one question that we just had come up is if you could tell us about some of the poets that influenced you.
Well, I've read poetry a lot. Throughout my life, throughout my grown-up life, and always loved it. Elizabeth Bishop is a poet I go to now, and I guess one of the poems that she's most famous for and that I'm most drawn to is Art, A-R-T, and it's the art of losing things. And then of course, Robert Frost, who is not as obvious in his messages as you might think. And when I was in college at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst, a bunch of us would go into Amherst to Amherst College and hear Robert Frost speak. And we were mesmerized by his words. And there was also a radio program that was being recorded of contemporary poets, and Frost was one of them in the faculty club. And I literally sat at his feet and drank in his words. But I like most poetry. And, in those days you would memorize poems. And I think that's a kind of good idea, like tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forest of the night. What immortal hand or eye was that something symmetry. So I think that gave us a feeling for poetry.
Yes. Will you be doing many readings this summer?
We're probably with the Flying Pig bookstore, and I'm doing several more Zoom readings. I mean, I miss the public. It's so great to make eye contact and see what people are feeling and communicate directly. But the benefit of Zoom is I sent a link to a friend in Switzerland. I'm not sure whether he got on or not, but you have such a wide scope of people who can participate. So it has its benefits, and you, as the speaker or reader, you have to use your imagination and just try to visualize the people who are out there. But I will be doing more events.
Oh, good. I think that we're all going to be excited about that. Someone asks, someone is kind of asking, how can we push more politicians into the realm of poetry? And I'd be curious to build on that. Do you know other, of colleagues of yours that go to poetry in times when they're?
I think McGovern went to writing poetry after his career, and his wife did too. It was either McGovern or McCarthy. I think it was McGovern. I think you just have to step back. I mean, a lot of people, when they end their political careers, either voluntarily or involuntarily, feel they have to go on, that they can't exist if they don't have a title and if they're not a public person getting applause. I never felt that it should be my whole life. And it was a transition period to become a politician, to get rid of my shyness, to learn to speak in public. So I think it's a very personal thing. I don't think you can encourage poetry in poets, in politicians to become poets, but I guess if they get enough applause, they'll move in that direction.
There might be something to that. We have another question, and this person is curious: is there a period in your life, or a time of day, or even a particular season where your poems or a topic have inspired you more easily?
Well, that's a good question. We have this romantic idea that you can't be creative unless the muse looks down upon you and gives you courage. I've learned both in fiction and nonfiction writing that you can't wait for the muse. There are times when I'm tired, when I think I can't write a word. If I sit down at my laptop, something happens. And you discover words. There's no particular season. I used to think there was a time of day, like the morning. Oh, sorry about that. I used to think I had to write at a time of day, but I've changed my mind about that. Now I can, one night I woke up in the middle of the night and some lines came to me, and I just got up and went to my laptop and wrote them down. I think the best advice ever given to me about writing of any kind is that all writing is rewriting. And it's putting down those first words, which you may look at and say, oh God, did I say that? But the truth is, you rewrite them. It's an ongoing process. And the process of revision and looking at it in different ways is very interesting. So don't be afraid of those first words, whether it's poetry or prose or scientific paper. You can polish it, you can revise it. In my own habit, I write a first version, which I've worked on for a bit, and then I let it sit. And either the next day or several days, I'll look at it again and revise it. And I might do that a few times. So it's it takes courage, of course, to expose yourself to criticism, to expose your own inner feelings. Poetry is much more personal than prose. And it took courage to be a politician too, but this is a different kind of courage. But as I'm older, I say to myself, I don't give a damn. I mean, this is who I am, and I'll take the risk. Is there time for a couple of more poems?
I think so. Yes.
Okay. This is called I Loved You When You Did the Dishes. I cooked, you did the dishes. Did I love you for that? I listened to the distant clattering in the kitchen while I sat in my chair reading the newspaper. We shared most tasks then, but you did the driving, and I could sit still by your side with only a rare glance in the rearview mirror to check if it was safe to pass. Now I do everything, cook and wash the pots and meet the dishwasher's greedy demands. I make the bed which you once made when we slept together. I push your wheelchair and straighten my back, not letting it sink into a stoop before its time. I feel my muscles tighten up the incline. I wish you could feel it too from your glued position. You need me now to move in any direction, up and down and around corners without bumping into things like winter boots thrown casually on the floor. I take the lead, pulling you out of yourself and into the world I inhabit. You visit me from time to time like you used to do when you did the dishes and the counters always needed wiping. The evening is better than this morning when you berated yourself for growing old. What can I do? You asked, pleading with yourself. I whispered, nothing. Evenings we meet out on the sofa and talk about a story in the New York Times or a scene from the evening news. We are same-minded again. The world is spinning crazily out of its orbit. We shake our heads from side to side in rhythmic disbelief. I reach for your still hand, cover it with mine, and keep it there. There's an earlier poem that I wrote when I first moved to Wake Robin, and it's called New Year's Eve at Wake Robin. The clock strikes the new year at Wake Robin around between 9 and 10. New Year's Eve at Wake Robin. The wheelchair danced in circles to the rapid beat of the Onion River Jazz Band. She was young again, unbound, free, no longer pushing him, but flying with him on the dance floor. He waved aside the ribboned oxygen tube streaming behind him. I grasped John with both hands and brought him to his feet, placing the walker within reach. He moved his head and then his arms and then his feet to the music. We danced, we sang, with the walker between us and love inside us. Well, I guess we have a few more minutes if you're still. I wish I could see you and communicate with you.
Someone has a request, actually. Speaking of that, they just put it in, and someone asked, can you read the poem about the similarities of the awakening of spring and rage coming in at the end of the pandemic?
I wish I knew what it was. Coming in spring. Well, while I'm looking for that, let me. I'm sorry.
Okay. So we have more hints. And Karen, if you would like to share these with Madeleine directly, you can unmute yourself. But Karen said that it was in the Digger, and I think more people are chiming in to try to figure out what this poem was.
It was the coming of spring, but then some rage. Okay. I don't know.
Madeleine, it's Karen Meyer. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Can you hear me, Madeleine? It's Karen Meyer.
Yes, I can hear you, Karen.
Good. It was a poem that you wrote, I think about 6 weeks ago or a month ago, about your feelings, and perhaps it was an essay, your feelings of the coming of spring, the commonalities of feeling with the potential end of the pandemic.
Yeah, I don't have the poems I wrote recently in front of me. Sorry.
Okay.
But thank you.
Everyone should read it. It was so beautiful and so hopeful about awakening and coming out of a difficult time, like winter or like COVID. So thank you for writing it, Madeleine, and all you do.
Thank you for pointing it out. I haven't read poems from Sicily. That's a period where it was so beautiful and I had free time and I had these nice friends and we had this house overlooking the ocean and we saw some ruins, ruins that go back to Greek times. So I'll read you this one called Selinunte, which was the name of the town. Columns spaced against the blue sky, still standing since 500 years before Christ, a vestige of who they were, bowed to a god we do not know, built by a slave we cannot pity, tumbled by an enemy we do not fear. I climb steps carefully, one at a time. Up is easy, down I hold your hand, fearing the fall that could force me to join them in their layered graves, sealed with golden flowers growing since the first stone was raised above another. Their offspring have bedded themselves into sun-fed brilliance, gold against dry stone, columns alive in their height, refusing to fall. This is
okay. Go ahead.
In the Coven section. This is called Home Alone. I think too much about myself when I'm home alone. No one reminds me to get up at 8 or turn off the light at 11. I sleep past the alarm and feel remorse for lost minutes, even hours. I used to be punctual, arriving in good time for dentists, doctors, and friends. The hands of the clock held me fast, marked my movements around the day. The pandemic has sickened my clock. It can no longer tell me what day it is. I luxuriate in being timeless, living alone, except when I open my eyes to my jittery television screen and the head of a fully grown nurse appears who tells me she has just finished her 10-hour shift and is going back to work. So I had no. I'll conclude with this poem. You probably have figured out I live at Wake Robin, and there are various sections. I live independently, and there's another section where my husband went, was taken care of and had more nursing care. And I would visit him, of course, each afternoon or evening. It's called the Love Poem. Each night, I wheel you to your door with a kiss on your lips. I smile, my love, at you, generously, I think. You don't know how much I love you, you say. I do, I do. We've formed a ritual of waving goodbye as I retreat slowly down the hall. At first, I wave with one hand in the air, and then my arms go wild before I turn the corner, as if struck by a storm or signaling for help. We wave in tandem. You are there, and I am here. The nurses now know we wave not for them, but for one another, to have and to hold the love we swore to once and forever.